Okay, ladies, should we start? I think 10 minutes is really sufficient. And I've just directed everybody else to Facebook Live. I don't know if anybody is on Facebook, just to see if everything is fine.
I'll have a look quickly.
Okay.
I also will check.
Okay, good. We're online. So I've directed about 20, 30 people.
Okay, good.
Facebook, if they can still make it into the room, it's fine, but we really need to start.
I've directed about...
Do you hear an echo?
Yes, I do.
Yeah.
No worries, Christine.
How distracting is that echo, guys?
No, it's gone now.
It's gone.
It's
okay.
fine, yeah.
All right. Hi, everybody. How are you doing?
Hello.
Ladies, panelists, we're the only ones who can be heard. So if we're silent, then it's dead.
Okay.
Welcome everybody to our first free webinar. The topic today is positioning yourself for success and avoiding high achievers burnout. My name is Christine Rita Abankwa. I'm the founder of Secure the Bag Africa, Pan-African Success Accelerators. And what it is a high performance coaching platform. So what we do is we bring together coaches, consultants, speakers, entrepreneurs on the continent and those in the diaspora so that we can network and advise each other. So today I'm joined by Njeri Mwangi, who is the head of anti-money laundering at the Capricorn Group here in Namibia, and Tabea Boye, who is a TEDx speaker, awareness coach, and growth specialist. So I'm going to hand over to Njeri. Just a few housekeeping rules. If you look right at the bottom of your screen, you can see options. There's the Q&A option, which is where you can type your questions and we can get to them later. Or you can go to chat if you want it to be a general conversation. So without further ado, Njeri, you can take over, and Tabea and I will stop our videos for now.
Thanks, Christine. I will just share my screen. I just need confirmation first that you can see my screen.
Yes.
Great. Hello, everyone.
Sorry, Njeri.
Yeah.
I just want to know if the attendees can see your screen. Can everybody see? Yes, Kiki says she can see. Shiro, Janita, okay. Everybody can see. Thank you. Everybody can see. Okay.
Do you see the presenter's view or can you see just the slides?
We can see the slides.
Okay.
Great. And you.
Great. Okay. Hi, everyone. I'm glad that you're all joining. Happy Labor Day to all of you, and I hope that you're keeping safe wherever you are. As Christine mentioned, my name is Njeri Mwangi. I'm based in Windhoek, Namibia, and I have been working for just over a decade within 3 institutions. Today, my aim is just to share my journey with you and hopefully just add value to your journey with the insights that I have gained in positioning yourself for success. So without further ado, I'll just get straight into the presentation. I trust that you can all hear me. I have been told that I'm quite soft-spoken, so if there's anyone struggling, please speak now or forever hold your peace. Great. Okay. So I think what is very important before I start sharing my journey is for us to be on the same page with regards to the definition of success. and especially within the African context, given that Secure the Bag is aiming the Pan-African context. So thinking about this earlier when I was preparing for this presentation, I was trying to reflect on what does success look like for most Africans. And I just found a meme that I thought was really suitable to this, and with no prejudice to my friends who are in these professions, but typically growing up in an African household, you would be told that, hey, you need to pursue either one of four professions to be considered successful, and that is either with your doctor, lawyer, engineer, or politician. And I think it's important to understand where this kind of thinking came from and how that has shifted over time. And in order for us to be able to position ourselves, we first must understand what does success look like for us in this day, vis-a-vis how it looked like in prior years. And I do believe that this meme is still relevant for a lot of people, but I would like to address what typically is the view in Africa, and that is being educated is often a connotation and affiliated with being successful. And there's a picture that most of us have grown up believing and seeing, and that is you go to school, you get the best grades, you graduate, either in one of those four professions, and then you amass a certain amount of wealth, get married, and establish a legacy which your children also replicate. And I think whilst there's nothing wrong with this image, I think some of us could argue that success has been defined for us. And I think it could also work against us, because if we are to apply certain principles and we have not defined success in line with our personas, we could find ourselves very frustrated. And I found that in my journey that I had to define success for myself over and over again until I found that it was true to the person that I am, sorry. Okay, sorry, I think. Okay, so the image you have in front of you is what I grew up believing to be the world, the projection of the world. It's the Mercator projection. I hope I'm pronouncing it right. And it was actually designed by a Flemish geographer in 1569. Throughout my childhood and throughout my young adulthood, I truly believe that this was the right projection of the world. Until out of curiosity, I decided to conduct some research and just look into which map is the most accurate projection of the world as we know it. And I came across the orthograph map, which was designed by a Japanese architect in 1999. Now, looking at these two world maps, you can see they look significantly different from each other. The way they're positioned and how the continents differ from the map that we have grown accustomed to believing as accurate to the one that the Japanese architect designed. What was of particular interest for me was that with the initial projection, Africa is approximately the same size as Greenland. That was the projection that the initial map had. Whereas with the second map that has been, is currently known as the most accurate map to date, Africa is 14 times bigger than Greenland. And the reason why I want to bring this up is that I think it's very relevant to the topic at hand. How do we look at success? What informs our view of success? Is it the books that we read? Is it what our parents told us? Is it the people we admired growing up? And should we start challenging our thinking and interrogating it so that we can be able to first accurately define ourselves and only thereafter apply the principles that we have read, which are written by people who have walked their own paths in positioning ourselves for success? So that was a big game changer for me once I looked at that map. And I started looking at the books that I was reading and interrogating the stories. And I became quite fascinated by people's stories, particularly successful people. And over time, we can see that the image of success has changed to include not only doctors, lawyers, politicians, but musicians, artists, runners. And what is also very interesting to point out is that a lot of these people who are conceived as successful, some of them are not educated. You know, the likes of Steve Jobs did not have a qualification. Now, that makes us question what principles should we apply and what thinking should we apply, not negating the value of formal education, but what drivers dictate success. Do we still conform to societal norms when we speak to our children and to our colleagues and advise them on how to become better? And what I found was a key indicator for success is progression. Meaning that if I am the same person I was 2 years ago, then I need to question whether I'm on the right path. And with that, I started thinking about how best would I advise somebody who is trying to consider what a picture of success would be. And I think identity is very key. Being self-aware, knowing yourself is so important nowadays because the world is very unkind to those who do not know their truths, to those who do not know themselves. And if you do not define yourself and define success for yourself, you'll find that you will conform to what the world says or what your peers say and what others say, you know, and leaving it to chance, which is not ideal. So the first pointer I would give is to recognize your bias and conditioning. Like the initial map that we've seen, some of you may have not questioned whether it is the right projection of the world as we know it. Some of you may not have known that Africa is 14 times bigger than Greenland per the accurate projection. So we should start asking ourselves and interrogating why we believe what we believe before we start mapping out our journeys. And there's a technique that I've found that is very useful in doing this, and that is an interrogative technique of the 5 whys. And it's normally used to determine what the root cause of an issue is. But if you start off by saying, I want to be an entrepreneur, ask yourself why several times. And often you'll find that the underlying reason for you wanting to be an entrepreneur could be completely different from what you set out to be in the first place. So that was useful for me when I left university. I started thinking, I graduated, I need to get a job, start making money, because that is what a successful person looks like. And very soon into my career, I started realizing it was not fulfilling for me. And I had to ask myself the whys several times. The third tip I would give is interview your future. And what do I mean by this? I'm basically saying that if you aspire to be in a certain position or a certain role, and that is what you connotate to success, then find somebody who has walked that path before you and ask them their whys. Ask them how their journey was like, and you will most likely get an image and gain a better understanding of what your life could be should you pursue that path. That's not definitely cast in stone because everyone's path differs, but it definitely gives you an informed view before you start applying the same principles or walking the same road as they have. So key takeaway is you need to know who you are and you need to define success for yourself, whilst also recognizing that you have bias and conditioning that could jeopardize your view. And also you need to interrogate why it is you want to do what you want to do. Okay. The next topic that I want to discuss is how do you, once you've defined success for yourself, demonstrate your value in the environment you're in. Now, I think it's important to mention for all the attendees that my experience primarily has been in the corporate setup, but I do believe that the insight I have will also apply to those who are in other environments, be it business or in the creative arts or so forth. It's important for you to study your environment, because in doing so, you're able to identify what the norms are and what it will take for you to progress. You may have established certain principles when growing up, in whether it be hard work, working smart, networking, but that might not work for the environment that you're in. So whilst owning your identity, having known what path you want to undertake, it's important for you to know what it will take for you to progress in your environment. And I think this is important because often the frustration of a lot of young adults and those in their professions is because they do not understand their environment they are in, and the environments are often not suited to their goals. Equally so, it's important for you to establish rapport with the decision makers. So by this, I don't mean that you need to play the fiddle and dance to the tune of those that you are working for, especially if it's not in line with your convictions. But it is important for you to establish rapport in order for you to understand your environment, understand the thinking of the leaders that you work with, understand the thinking of the partners you want to the partners that you want to engage with in future business, because in doing so, then you're able to know whether this will work for you or it will not. I think if there's anything that the COVID-19 has taught us is that nothing is cast in stone. And because of that, it is important for us to have resilience and to be adaptable to change. There is no formula-based approach to success. So for those of you who signed up for this meeting hoping to get a formula for success, I'm sorry to disappoint you. But as unique as we are individuals, so is our journey, and so are the circumstances that we'll be exposed to. But your character stands through it all. And it's important for you to be able to adapt to change and to be resilient through difficulties, because this is a given no matter what path you choose to take. It goes without saying that in order for you to be able to demonstrate your value, you have to be able to show more than what the average person is doing and give more than what the average person is doing. An example from my experience is when I was working at E&Y for the first 5.5 years of my career, I definitely did not want to do just the basic. And when we were given opportunities to work in environments that were deemed harsh by others, I put my hand up and I said, I want to go and work in other countries. I want to work in environments which I've not been exposed to, and I want to work in industries that I have no experience in. And in doing so, I was able to learn beyond what I knew and add value to others who are going to venture in the same path. So if you want to demonstrate your value and progress in whatever space you're in, it's important that you are able to go the extra mile, because that is how you stand out. And definitely it's important to challenge yourself. And for me, this has really been one of the key reasons I believe that I am where I am, is that I did not want to be comfortable. I moved from studying marketing to accounting to forensic auditing, and now I'm in anti-money laundering. And a lot of times it was very uncomfortable to be in those spaces, because the nature of the work demanded that you performed, and not only performed well, but performed to a standard that was above the rest, because the output that you had could impact others' lives significantly. So challenging myself has become the norm, be it in my professional space or in my personal space. It's helped me to be able to tackle difficult circumstances. It's helped me to be able to deal with conflict. But being comfortable will often not be able to showcase your strengths or even showcase the weaknesses that you need to work on. So I'd really encourage everyone who wants to stand out to get out of their comfort zone. And then definitely big picture thinking. And when I say that, it's not just doing what you have to, but thinking, what is the result of what I do to the organization, to this business, to society, to others around me? And in doing so, you're able to look at work and look at business and look at your performance differently, rather than applying the same principles that another would do. If you've assigned a value to your work or to your business, you are able to give more value to it. I don't think I say that well. What I mean to say is that if you're able to see beyond the present, then your performance will be impacted by that, and you will be able to demonstrate value. And this is where the difference between productivity and output comes in. You can wake up every single day and do what you're required to do in terms of your job description or in terms of what your employer requires. But if you have an understanding of what your employer aims to achieve, for example, when I worked with NAMFISA, the vision of NAMFISA at the time was to be a respected regulator. That informed my work. I just didn't give advice for the sake of giving advice to industry, but I gave advice seeking to be an expert that certain persons could come to gain more insight, rather than just to find out what revisions to the law we had at the time. So I think these are the key pointers when it comes to demonstrating your value, and these are the key pointers I've applied in my career, and I've seen that in doing them, that I've progressed faster than the average person. In terms of leadership, this is something that I really feel challenged to talk about, because I think it's an ongoing it's ongoing, and I'm learning every single day. But what I found really works for me is applying the theory of transformational leadership. And simply this is a theory that looks at inspiring others around you, challenging others to take ownership of what they have to do, and also, more importantly, leading through impact and influence. Similarly, transformational leadership is not something that I just apply when working with my teams, but it's also working with those that I'm in partnership with, and also working with those who lead me. If I need to submit a proposal, I need to be able to inspire my leader to push it through. If I need the team to go the extra mile, I need them to have buy-in on the project. So trying to establish a collective sense of consciousness and identity within the team, within the organization as a whole, is what will take us to the next level. That's what I've found. So it's still a learning curve for me, but I've definitely seen it's effective when I use this approach in dealing with people, be it in conflict, be it through change, be it through difficult times where we need to put in extra hours. Stimulating those around you and leading by example has definitely been effective in my experience. Okay. Herding tigers, one of my favorite topics. I call my team in Capricorn tigers, and I got this concept from a book I read. I must admit I didn't finish the book because I thought the first 2 chapters summarized everything in the book for me, but it really assisted me in learning how to manage people. And one of the most important principles I've learned is learning to establish trust as a leader. So creating an environment of trust also requires some vulnerability. It requires taking ownership of your faults and being able to communicate effectively to your team throughout all seasons, be it through difficulties, be it through changes and challenges that they face. And in creating that trust, you're able to inspire and impact your team to do more. Have I been able to do this effectively? I think there's still a way to go, but I do think that over time I've learned that if you're able to build trust within a team, communicate effectively with them, and inspire them to go the extra mile, you will definitely have an effective team that impacts the organization. They will be able to operate effectively with or without you. And I think as leaders, this is very important because we've learned most recently that you being a boss does not make you a leader. And being a leader, you have to look at whether you're able to have a team run your function without you. And when you establish trust and you lead by example and you set the bar and develop values that everyone is invested in, you do not need to micromanage your team. So that's where influence comes in, you know, and influence is two-way. I learn from my team learns from me. Actually, I'm not afraid to say that I have people in my team who are more competent than I am, but that's who tigers are. You know, they all have their individual set of skills, and when they decide to attack, I think it's a beautiful thing to watch. They need no guidance. It's almost like instinct. So these principles, whilst they've been valuable for me, I've also learned in the most recent years, the past 5 years, that not one size does not fit all. So when you're leading a team, do not take a principle that you've learned from a book or from your peer and use it for everyone in the team. With one person, a one-on-one meeting can work. With another person, they just need structure and order. With another team member, they would actually like flexibility. So whilst you're establishing trust as a leader and you're applying the principles that you have garnered through the years, it's important to know that as unique as we are individuals, so is the way we want to relate, so is the way we want to work. And especially given the way everyone has been raised in different environments and the different generations, it's important for us as leaders to know that we need to engage with our team members and those around us more effectively. Okay, last but not least, what have I learned with regards to negotiating my pay? This is a very sensitive topic, and what I want to share is how I was able to negotiate my pay in the area that I'm working and share my learnings. Like, there's a lot of information online, and I think a lot of people, when they are interviewing for a job, you're inundated with all the articles and all the information that you find online. But what is important for us, especially within the African context, is to be able to understand the environments that we're in and research within that context. Because what Forbes says and what PayScale says is not necessarily what works in your field or in your country. So it's important for you to make informed decisions based on fact. And by that I mean, you need to research the company, research your jurisdiction, look at the economic indicator. You have to be able to have an understanding of where you're pitching and how much you can pitch. It is not enough for you to go and say, I want a market-related salary. So I would really encourage everyone to research. But when you're conducting research, what I found was valuable for me was not researching from the angle of an employee or somebody who is seeking to negotiate higher, but rather what the position of the company is. And what I've found really insightful is that most human resource practitioners have a bandwidth of about 20%. So if you are given an offer, depending on the skills that you have, if you want to negotiate, you have up until 20% over and above the offer to negotiate. So this was really interesting for me to find out. and also being able to understand the company that I was engaging with and the people who I was talking to helped me position my negotiation offer better. And I was really deliberate about that, and it gave an exact amount. And that's really what I have to share. But there's a lot of information, but I think these key tips would definitely help those who are seeking to negotiate their salary or trying to interview for a new job. Okay, just want to conclude with this picture. This is my, what I call my image of success. It's a picture of myself and my 3 aunts at the summit of Kilimanjaro, and this was taken in 2012. It was a very taxing climb to get to the top. And what's interesting about this picture is that you have 3 generations, 3 people from different backgrounds, but we were able to get to the top and nobody was asking us, how did you get there? So really the moral is to say we all have our different journeys. You need to craft out your own path, learn from the principles of others, but also realize that when you get to the top, you need to also celebrate your wins. That's all I have to share.
Thank you so much, Njeri. That was great. There are a few questions that I would like us to address before we move to Tabea, and then of course our final Q&A. So Angela is asking, can you expound on recognizing your bias and conditioning?
Okay, I think this is really important, and thanks, Angela. For me, it was being able to, very similar to the picture that I put up, is being able to understand what informed my view of success. First and foremost, was it my parents, my family, my peers, people that I admired, and also being able to ask, is this true to who I am? So writing out your story, your view of the world, and then interrogating what informed it. So could your bias be your faith? Could your bias be your upbringing? Could your bias be your peers and those who have influenced you? So that's what I meant by recognizing your bias and conditioning, as well as your education.
Okay, thank you. The next question is from Fafa. She's asking, if you find yourself in an environment where transformational leadership is not prioritized, is it worth staying there and trying to influence change, or should you rather move on?
So personally, my experience has been that when I've exhausted all my options, that is when I move. So going back to the key tips that I gave in terms of demonstrating your value, there will be times where you have to be resilient. There are times you will have to be adaptable. And if you want to be a leader, you should be able to influence change and impact those around you. If you've exhausted all of those, then I think that is a discussion to have with yourself and say, this environment is not suitable to myself, and now I can move on.
And for someone who isn't yet at leadership level, how can you establish what the leadership culture of an organization is before you join?
I think definitely talking to people who work there, having frank discussions with them. I think that is something that I've learned works for me. And also having frank discussions with the leaders themselves. I found that sometimes during the interview process, candidates are either afraid or intimidated to ask questions to the leaders. Why is the vacancy there? What is the culture like here? What challenges do you experience? And through asking those questions, you're able to pick up on the thinking and the culture of the organization. So this is definitely a question that would be best met by having frank conversations with people in that environment.
Right. And Anna is asking, how does one negotiate in instances where a company has flat salary structures?
That is a really interesting and challenging question, Anna. I think very similar to the other question, this is where you have to explore your options. you know, first and foremost, you have to have a frank discussion. I've been in an environment like that, and I think in some cases I found that it wasn't one size fits all. So positioning yourself definitely as somebody who adds value is key before you have a discussion with regards to your pay. It's not a personal discussion, but it's an informed decision based on facts. So once you've explored that option of having a frank discussion of this is a value you have, and this is what you have found is best practice in the market, then you should consider other options. And that's just truly my view. But I stand to be corrected.
Right, and just to add, if they're flat salary structures, how can you demonstrate your value? Because sometimes it's about the conversation that you have with the leader and your ability to demonstrate and record all the value that you've brought and justify your increased salary. So do you have any tips on how to really show people the value that you're bringing?
I think going back to what I said, it's important for you to study your environment, right? And when I say that, I really was reflecting back on my own experience. Sometimes your environment will require you to either study further. For example, audit environments are very much so like that, or you need to bring in more business. When you're able to look at and identify what the pulse of the organization and what are the triggers that make the leadership team perk their ears and look at you differently, then you're able to have an informed discussion. But if you haven't studied your environment and established that rapport, then you're almost in you are at a disadvantage. There's a saying that I like to refer to, and Sun Tzu says, the best of wars are won without a battle being fought. So it's really about having a strategic mindset and doing your research and studying your environment. I know it might not work in all cases, but I've found that in my experience, that is what has worked.
And just to add to that, Njeri, you are one of a handful of females in AML in Namibia. How do you add value? You know, this is not just about being a woman or being a man, but how do you add value in a male-dominated space, but then also a space that's dominated just by other people? It's not just about male, female, maybe it's somebody's qualifications are better or they have a better network. How did you really establish that value and show people what you're capable of?
Okay, so I think it's some of the answers are in the presentation, but if I have to simplify it, really it's knowing my identity and then marrying my values with those of the ones that I want to benefit from or those that I want to demonstrate my value to. For example, in anti-money laundering, we have national assessments, and these are country assessments that could really impact the economy in a disadvantage, in a really bad way. So when I am engaging with those in influential positions or even in the environment that I'm in, I want to talk the same language. I want to look beyond what I do, but look at what we do, you know, and demonstrate how can I be able to add value to yourself and myself. So it's not easy. I really want to emphasize that it's not a principal decision that you make and then you apply it and it works. But when you are able to bring an output to the table that people need, your value definitely will be seen. So yeah,
two more questions, just two more questions. First of all, Njeri, can you give us an example of when you had to negotiate your salary and were you happy with it?
Yes, the example I used in my last slide is actually exactly what I did. I researched the company, but I researched the company looking at what position they would take if I was to meet up with them and ask for an offer. And when I found out that HR practitioners have a bandwidth of 20%, I negotiated my salary up to.
Oh no, I think we have lost her. Can everybody else? Tabea, are you there?
Yes, I'm here.
Technology. I think that Njeri has been knocked off. She will come back and we will put her back on the hot seat to tell us exactly how she negotiated a top salary. In the meantime, please keep your questions coming in. We'll answer them as best we can. And I'm going to hand over to Tabea to start her presentation on avoiding burnout.
Thank you so much. Can everybody hear me? I'm going to share my screen now. Okay, let me just do this and just a moment. Okay. All right, this is me. Thank you for introducing me, Christine. This is me in a nutshell, and I'm very passionate about people. I'm very passionate about storytelling and the arts and expressing myself creatively. But in 2011, I was diagnosed with a burnout. And that's part of the reason why I do what I do today, because I want to prevent unnecessary suffering. A burnout is not to be taken lightly. And before we delve into the facts, because this will be quite a jam-packed session, I would like to ask you a question. Are you positioning yourself for success or for burnout? You really need to understand a few facts, and that's why we're having this session tonight on how to avoid high achievers burnout, because awareness is power. Once you are aware, you have the power of choice. Before we really delve into this subject, I would like to define a few things. First and foremost, what is a high achiever? A high achiever is basically anyone who wants to excel in his or her field. And it doesn't matter whether you are a housewife or a business person, a professional, or a student. Because as soon as you try to give your best, you're prone to get a burnout. There are 3 personality types that are especially vulnerable, and that's the workaholic, it's the people's pleaser, and the perfectionist. Furthermore, I want you to look at the general definition of a burnout, because as Njeri rightfully said, we all have to be on the same page to really understand the impact of things. So let me share the following slide. There it is. Please read that sentence carefully. The general definition of a burnout is the reduction of a fuel or a substance to nothing. And I repeat, to nothing, through use or combustion. And please keep that definition in mind when we move on to the definition of a human burnout, which is this. That's the physical or mental collapse and complete emotional exhaustion caused by overwork and chronic stress. And as you can see, it is not happening overnight. It is a gradual process. So you will not wake up one morning after a bad day at work or maybe a bad week and you're burned out, because I'm burned out is such a buzzword. But as the picture suggests, it's really devastating. So let's have a look at the next slide. This is a beautiful red sports car, and who wouldn't want to have one? I definitely do. When it comes to our personal belongings, especially to cars and to our houses, we all understand the concept that it's essential to maintain a car, that it's essential that we need to paint our houses every now and then in order to keep their value. But we fail to apply this principle to our personal lives. And if we don't, this is what we are heading for. It's the highway to hell. And as you can see, the destination doesn't seem to be very pleasant. So there are 12 stages of a burnout. And there were two American psychologists that actually developed a model, which I want to share with you because it's quite an eye-opener and very needed to understand the impact of a burnout on your overall life and your health and your well-being and that of your family as well. So stage one is the absolute urge to prove yourself, and that affects high achievers because these are the employees who show the most enthusiasm, who take on extra responsibilities, and who want to demonstrate their worth obsessively. Stage two is the stage of working harder and the inability to switch off. And then it's followed by erratic sleeping, the eating is disrupted, and you don't interact that much socially anymore. Dismissing of conflicts. You're feeling panicky, jittery, and threatened, irritated as well. Then there's the revision of values. Values are skewed and family and friends are dismissed. You don't enjoy your hobbies anymore. And work really becomes your life. Denial of emerging problems. You become more cynic, aggressive, intolerant, and you perceive others as stupid and demanding, and they really work on your nerves. Problems are viewed as caused by time pressure and work and not because of life changes. Withdrawal, that's real. So you have little to no social life anymore, and you need to turn to substances to feel a relief from stress, and that can become problematic in itself. Then behavior changes. That's when friends and family really become concerned. And depersonalization is the next step. You're basically just an empty shell. You don't value yourself and you don't value your needs anymore. It's followed by inner emptiness. It's not a nice feeling. And in order to overcome this, people turn to over-exaggerated activities like drugs, alcohol, sex, overeating, gambling even. And as you can see, the fire is really increasing. It's getting hot. You're really in the hot seat. The next step is depression. It is, however, not common that everybody that is on the road to a burnout experiences depression. So some might not, but anxiety is a common occurrence. So most burnout patients suffer from anxiety. And that's the last and final stage. That's a full-blown burnout. As you can see, you've got a nice fire going on here. And that's the time to really seek full medical attention before it's too late. This is what it feels like, but unfortunately, you're not the attraction of the party. It feels more like this. And yeah, this is a short summary that I did, how burnout feels like. I will now share my personal experience. As I said, 9 years ago, I was diagnosed with a severe burnout. I went to the doctor because I couldn't handle it anymore. I felt like an empty shell. I had no emotions left and no empathy. I was eating, breathing, living, dreaming, sleeping, work. I was functional to a certain extent. I felt like this Duracell bunny. I couldn't stop, and I couldn't sleep anymore. And that was actually why I went to the doctor. I felt something is wrong. I don't want to go on like this, but I couldn't stop being forced to work. I couldn't remove myself from this vicious circle. So the doctor gave me a very short diagnosis. He said, you've got a burnout. Here's some sleeping pills, goodbye. So the sleeping pills helped me, but I was still trapped in my circle of work. Eventually, I went on a 2-week holiday, and that was the best thing I could ever do. I felt refreshed, re-energized, and when I came back, I thought, okay, this was my burnout. Life can continue as normal. But I was so wrong because, like the lockdown, there was no normal anymore. There was total disruption. As soon as I wanted to go back into my old Duracell bunny mode, my body would go on strike completely. It would refuse to obey me. I would get sick. And it took me a year to come to terms with this new reality of mine. It doesn't help that I was born and raised in Germany. I'm here now in Namibia for 25 years. But yeah, there is something about the German stubbornness that can really add to the damage. So it took me a year to come to my senses and to understand that my body doesn't obey me, but I have to obey my body. And then the big question was also, how do I reinvent my life? How do I restructure my life? It was 2011. Burnout wasn't really a big thing. It wasn't common. So I had nowhere to turn to, and I had to find a solution by trial and error. And needless to say, it was a hard journey. And what is right and what is wrong, and where do I start? And that is why it's so important that you really take care of yourself. Because besides of the 12 stages of the burnout and this total feeling of inner emptiness and basically not existing anymore, a burnout can seriously damage your brain. In my case, I have a problem to remember names and faces. So if you ever happen to meet me on the street and I don't greet you, please don't be mad at me. Just tell me, listen, I've met you there and then, because it's not on purpose. Chronic stress can kill your brain cells, and burnout can cause your prefrontal cortex to shrink. And that's where your memory and your learning ability is basically located. But a burnout is not a terminal illness. Its effects can be reversed. It takes a long time, however, and some real determination. Just to give you another example of how bad a turnout can be, a friend of mine from the Netherlands, she was misdiagnosed. Because her mom is bipolar, she was diagnosed as bipolar as well. And she was lying in bed, she was bedbound for 5 years. And it took her another 5 years until she recovered to a state where she was able to work half day again. So this was due to her misdiagnosis, that it took that long, but it just goes to show that you shouldn't play with a burnout. It also has a severe effect on your relationships, because people around you, they don't understand you. You are not pleading to death. Your family won't understand what's going on and that you need to change your life. I mean, it caused my divorce. I still have not such a good relationship with my son today because he lost trust in me, because I couldn't show empathy, I couldn't show any emotions. So it's really necessary to take your health and your well-being seriously. Let's go to the next slide. We're in Africa, and especially in the African context, a burnout can get an added twist. I don't have to tell you anything about black tax. Black tax can be Ubuntu, or it can be a total burden. And trying to navigate your well-being and your mental health while sticking to traditions might be tricky. But in essence, you have to take care after yourself, because if you don't take care of your vehicle, how will you finish your race? Or how will you even be able to complete it and achieve what you want to achieve and help others in the process? The road to recovery is bumpy. As you can see, it's not a highway. It's just a small bushfield track. And the destination is beautiful. So it's definitely worth your while to make the effort, because the rewards are there. But it's tricky because your environment will not understand it. They will look at you and say, I don't understand. She was on fire and she was always that driven. And now what's happening now? My family couldn't understand why me as a people's pleaser had to say no all of a sudden, and they were rebelling against it. They couldn't understand why the perfectionist in me was starting to be laissez-faire and to ignore things because it was a survival mechanism. They also couldn't understand how I could move from being a work alcoholic to becoming a mindfulness practitioner. They couldn't understand how you could move from a blast to a spark, and it feels like drowning. You're burning out, but you're actually drowning, and you're trying to stay afloat. So what can you do against this bystander effect, where they look at you and they don't know what to do? This is what you can do. You need to stand up for yourself. You need to speak and act. And it's copy, paste, copy, paste, copy, paste, copy, paste. And this is difficult because you also have to come to terms with a new situation. And that's why it's important to really speak up and to seek for help. Because if you want to be meaningful in life, if you want to be successful, if you want to help others, if you want to have an impact, if you want to be significant, the aeroplane safety rule principle applies. You have to help yourself first before you can be meaningful to others. So what to do after a burnout? As I said, take yourself seriously, because if you don't, no one else will. Verbalize it, get help. Don't try to do this on your own. I mean, you can, I'm the living proof, but it takes much longer and it's a much harder route to go. Do what you can and nothing more. And this is hard, especially in the beginning, because you still want to fall back into old patterns. You want to push yourself to the max. You're not used to the fact that you need to obey to your body, but you simply have to rest, pull the plug, and try to develop a mindfulness practice, yoga, meditation, and moderate exercise. Please bear in mind that you shouldn't exercise too much, because in essence, when you're burned out and when you are suffering from chronic stress, your body is basically operating on a 24/7 emergency system with limited body functions. And basically, that's why stress is causing 95% of all diseases. Your disease will break out where your weakest link is. It will show where your weakest link in the body is. That's why it's important to get to know your body. Catch the warning signs. If you're really stressed, how will your body react? Discover your soul and your essence. Take up hobbies. Do fun stuff. Do the stuff that you love. You need to create a work-life balance. That's very, very important. Discover your boundaries. No is a full sentence and needs no explanation. And it takes practice, but it's worth it. Communicate your needs. Start a journal, and also a gratitude journal, but a journal as well regarding your progress, so that you can give yourself a pat on the back and that you don't feel lost in time, that you really feel that you're moving forward. And don't schedule meetings. Oh, yes, do schedule meetings, not just schedule meetings, also schedule downtime. Make it a priority and prioritize your life, declutter your life. Do you really have to do everything? Or could you maybe let others do some tasks? Then you need to get that fire burning again, slowly and surely and steadily. That's very important. And in doing that, you have to establish a new normal and develop healthy coping mechanisms. So you really are forced to take a close look at your life. Where are you displaying self-destructive behaviors? And the key question, that's basically your compass, your guideline, is how do I want to feel? Because this determines your goal. And the next magical question is, how can I make myself feel that way? Because don't wait for others to make you feel in a certain way. Your well-being and your health is your responsibility. So in order to get a successful fire burning, you need 3 ingredients. That's oxygen, heat, and fuel, and you need a constant supply. So it's important to create a balance so that you can get your fire burning again after a burnout. And I would like to encourage yourself to please take care and take yourself seriously, because you matter, and don't burn like tinder. You want to have an impact. You want to shine your light. So keep that fire burning. And yeah, these are some of my services that I'm offering. You can contact me at the email address and the cell phone number, and you can follow me on social media at @growtabea. Please contact me if you have questions. If you need guidance, I can do that for you. I'm here for you. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much for that, Tabea. I think this is a very important conversation, because as we chase whatever it is we're chasing, there's a tendency to forget about your own well-being. There's something I want to touch on before I move on to the questions. You mentioned losing trust with your son, and prior to that, you were unable to show empathy. So what I want to ask is, when we're under pressure, there are a lot of things that we do, there are a lot of things that we say, and sometimes the damage has already been done. So how do you go about sort of trying to reverse the effects of burnout on your loved ones?
It's very difficult because first and foremost, what we also need to understand when we are in a survival mode, which we are once we are entering the stress response, we are operating from our reptilian brain. And when we are in that stage, we cannot show compassion. To restore the relationship with your loved ones, it also depends on them. So my son doesn't want to open up. We had the conversations, but he has a trust issue. I cannot force him to come back to me. I cannot force him to trust me. So that's a gradual process, and it will happen hopefully over time. I was able to establish that with my daughter, but unfortunately I wasn't able to save my marriage, because I also had to change so much due to my burnout that we basically grew apart.
Thanks for that, Tabea. Let's get to the questions. So there's a question here. How do you distinguish between feeling burnt out and just feeling hopeless?
That's a tricky question, because it would also depend on all the other symptoms, and it would, I would have to have a conversation with the person in question to really check if that person is not on the way to a burnout. I mean, feeling hopeless every now and then, feeling down every now and then is normal. I would also like to add to that stress is a normal occurrence. Without stress, your life would be absolutely boring. So we need stress. So we have negative stress and positive stress. Like positive stress is something that you are looking forward to, like a wedding or a holiday or organizing a birthday party. The problem is the chronic stress. So as soon as your body cannot come back to a normal state, to the relaxation response, so to speak, that's when it becomes problematic. And that's when this vicious circle starts.
And Claire wants to know, everyone wants to be an overachiever. As Njeri said, it's part of displaying your value. Where does one cross the line? So I don't know if this question is directed at both of you. I think it speaks to both of you in a way. So maybe Tabea, you could start off. What is the difference between being an overachiever and crossing the line?
Basically, you need to understand yourself in order to position yourself. You need to understand what your limits are, because otherwise, if you don't, you will cross the limits and you will overachieve. There's a difference between an overachiever and a high achiever. You need to understand your limits. And what I want to say, sorry, can you repeat the question again? I lost track.
What is the difference between, okay, so achieving is basically part of displaying your value. How do you know when you're crossing the line into now overachieving, which would probably lead to burnout?
Yeah. Look, everybody has unique stresses. what is stressing me might not stress you. So the key question, the magic question here is, how do I want to feel? You always have to go back to your emotions, to your body, listen to your body, your soul, and your mind, basically. Listen to your heart. Ask yourself that question, how do I want to feel? If something makes you feel uncomfortable, that's a pointer. If you cut yourself, then you look at the wound immediately. You look at the source of the pain, but we tend not to do that when it comes to emotional pain or when we don't feel well. But we need to pay attention to these pointers and adjust our behavior accordingly. And these are your indicators, and they vary individually.
There's another question here. What kind of questions
Christine?
should one... Oh, sorry, Njeri. You were
Yeah,
also supposed to answer the same question.
I think it's a very good question, and I think it's personally it's also something that I had to deal with, and I think it comes back to you being able to know your truths and being able to define success. So success is, you don't have a linear view with success. You're a holistic human being, so you define success for yourself personally, socially, professionally, and whatever you do has to come from that place of peace. So if you are overachieving, it's an indicator that you are operating outside the sphere of the way you've defined success, because overachieving is subjective. I work sometimes all night to perform a task, but it's from a place of joy and peace. It's in line with what I've defined for myself, and I'm not jeopardizing the other facets of my being, be it spiritually, personally, or other. If that performance in one area is impeding in the performance of another area, then I need to have a conversation with myself. And I think that's the reason why it's so important for us to define success, and holistically, not just professionally. Yeah.
Thank you for that,
I would
Njeri.
like to add to that. If you have this short period of stress where you really have to push and you have to put in 1 or 2 late nights, even 3 late nights, it's okay, but it mustn't become a habit. So you need to have keep track of what you're doing.
Pace yourself. Don't go overboard. Right.
Yeah.
Thank you. Tabea, there's another question here. What kind of questions should one ask themselves to see if one is headed for burnout?
You could actually look up the 12 stages of a burnout, just as a guideline, as a general guideline, because I think many of the answers you will find there. But are you happy with yourself? Are you feeling well? Are you really taking time for yourself? Take basically a general inspection of your own life. Do a stock take. And as always, ask yourself the question, where do I want to be? And am I moving towards my goal, pushing myself or pulling myself? The other day, I did a video on the push and pull factor in migration. So when people are forced to leave their country, they don't necessarily want to do that, but they do so because there's famine, there's war, there's basically fear and lack that's pushing them away. They don't have any other option. So are you operating from a perspective of fear or lack, or do you feel drawn towards an environment that's better, where you have abundance, where you have freedom and success and all of that? So are you pulling yourself from a perspective of love and telling yourself, okay, I'm walking towards my goal. Today I don't feel good. It's okay if I don't jog, for instance. I can just go for a walk, but I'm still contributing towards my fitness goal. I might move a little bit slower, but I'm still pursuing my goal. So I think that might be a good analogy to answer that question.
Right. Thanks, Tabea. Another one. I work with the Japanese, biggest workaholics, and I have to do serious SWOT analysis of myself before I can find a work-life balance. But it's challenging at some point, you have to put your foot down. Any advice for working with different nationalities?
I think it's important to understand the cultural background, their way of doing things, and also to point out the differences. And it boils down to can you handle the pressure? Is a certain environment made for you or not? Can you adapt or can't you adapt? And be open and honest about it. Don't operate from a perspective of lack. Oh, I'm afraid to lose my job. I'm afraid to not find something similar. Because if it's not made for you, then it's not meant for you. If you don't feel well, then this is not your path. And this is where you should know your truth. And because if you don't know your truth, that's, as Njeri said, you will not be successful.
Right. So I'm going to take the very last 7 questions because soon we'll need to close, unfortunately. Mwewa is asking, in this age of running around, isn't it the line between knowing that I am now burning out and adopting a laissez-faire attitude very slim, and one can easily fall into one category and only realize when it is too late?
Okay, I don't know if you have the tendency to be a high achiever. I think you will never run the risk to be a lazy person. I can only speak from my own perspective. Boring is something, it's a word that doesn't exist in my life. I don't even know how it works because I always find something to do. And I have to keep myself in check all the time because I'm very passionate, I'm very driven. And we've spoken about this, I think just this morning or yesterday. As people's persons, as givers, as empaths, we need to really keep track of what we're doing because we're constantly running the risk of burning out, of giving too much of ourselves. So in my honest opinion, I think there's not such a slim line because there's really a huge gap, and the golden balance is in the middle. You need to find the balance. But
so basically, Tabea, you're saying that as a high achiever, it's very unlikely that you would be accused of being lazy. So you shouldn't feel bad about needing to slow down sometimes. It doesn't mean that you're lazy.
No, it doesn't mean that you're lazy. It's just, it means you're creating a necessary balance. I was wondering the other day why I am so tired. I'm actually not stressed. I'm doing the things that I love. I started to do daily blocks when the lockdown started. But then I realized as much as I enjoy it, my brain is basically on a creative high all the time since I do a video a day. And I struggle to basically calm down, to switch off. That's when I realized, okay, something is wrong. So I had to do my checks and balances. I had to ask myself, where am I heading for? What is the origin of my problem? Sometimes it's not that easy to understand and you really need to do some digging. But eventually you will find the answer.
And then let me see. Sorry, yes, Njeri.
I do agree with Tabea. And I think sometimes when we are calling people high achievers and when we're looking at ourselves as high achievers, I think this is something a lot of people who are working in the corporate space as well as those who are entrepreneurs aspire to. It's really, really also crucial for us to look at output versus productivity. And I think that's where contentment and rest and peace comes in and just steering away from burnout. If you are, for the better part, being productive and your output is not aligned to your goals or your measures of success, I definitely can see how that can frustrate you and drain you. I do think, like what Tabea says, you being self-aware is very important. You having a balance is very important, but you having direction and measuring what you do against your goals is equally important. When you work for an organization, aligning your goals to the organizational goals is also equally important. That way you feel fulfilled. I think sometimes the frustration that some people have is because they are not working towards their goals. They're working towards another person's goals, or they're simply being productive from 8 to 5 and walking away not feeling like they've achieved anything. So it's what's useful for me practically is to set out my day by saying, this is what I want to achieve in line with my personal goals and in line with organizational goals. That way I go to bed happier. Do I do it perfectly? Not every single day, but it definitely has been a useful tool for me in watching the way I work and steering away from being frustrated.
Thank you for that, Njeri.
I would like to add to that, because as a creative, I have a slightly different way of working, and sometimes my whole day gets completely it's basically completely dear mekaar, as the Afrikaans people will say, for lack of the English word now. It's basically because my intuition also guides me. So I listen, I'm really in tune with myself, and especially when it comes to video production, sometimes at the last minute, I choose a different topic. So sometimes I don't do what's on my list, but I have stopped bashing myself because of it. Because by listening to myself, what I produce that day might just be better suited and the outcome is better. So the message that I want to bring across, the point I'm trying to make is, don't bash yourself if you don't manage to fulfill your to-do list. Don't let your to-do list become a reason to burn out and to say, I wanted to do X, Y, Z. No, you've done stuff on your to-do list. That's fine. That's the walking slower. But as long as you move forward, it's good.
These are really powerful insights. I'm going to take the last few questions. I know that we wish we could go on until 8 or 9. It is a Friday night, guys. Where are you going anyway? Where are you going? Okay, on a serious note.
Lockdown.
Lockdown, okay. How can you try to be successful and avoid chronic stress while also taking care of a family member with a serious illness?
Well,
I think,
yeah.
Njeri, you want to answer?
Oh no, I was just empathizing. It's a heavy question. Yeah.
Loaded.
It is a heavy question, and I think the key here is to ask for help and to delegate as much as possible, and to just tell people, listen here, I need help. I can't do it on my own. Turn to other family members. Maybe you can get professional support, but don't try to do it on your own because you feel you owe the person something or you want to really take care. As perfectionists, we also feel that it's only us that can help. And we need to let go of that. We need to build a network of support in these situations.
Agree.
Yeah. I mean, it's a heavy one. You're dealing with a loved one who's sick. If you can't get the support you need, I guess now it's time for you to use the tools that we've been discussing in terms of managing yourself emotionally to let go of some of that pressure.
I would like to share a really valuable relaxation trick. So when you're feeling really tired and you feel like taking a nap, just do yourself the favor and acknowledge that your body is tired. By taking a short break and just do a deep breathing exercise by closing your eyes and take 10 deep breaths. That's all you need because you provide your body with extra oxygen. It calms you down. It strengthens your focus and your concentration, and you've taken yourself seriously. It's not always the big stuff that we do that helps. Like we always think in big terms, like I need to work hard and then I've got the weekend, or I need power this year and then I've got a 2-week holiday at the end of the year. No, take baby steps. Take yourself seriously every day. Take that small little pause of 10 breaths to get that much needed oxygen. That's what you can incorporate in your daily life, no matter how busy you are. You have these 2 minutes or you have these 5 minutes.
Thank you for that, Tabea. I think it's really important for us to understand the wellness techniques, how you coach yourself. I've been in situations like that, terrible situations, that I actually had to put my studies on hold and work was suffering. And, you know, it didn't end for about 2 years. right? But at some point, I had to reach a point where I was now managing myself because this situation was not going away. And also, if it's really bad, you should probably get therapy. So one more question about burn. Yeah. Sorry, Tabea.
Sorry. I always say I am a coach, but I cannot necessarily help myself. I have a great gift of introspection, but sometimes I just need another coach to help me. And it's okay, because we might not see the answer and we just need guidance. So it's okay to just ask for help and to ask for guidance and to learn. I mean, stress management techniques are a necessity, because we're trying to cope and we turn to unhealthy coping mechanisms. But do we really manage? No, we're just ruining our health and overall well-being in the process. So asking for help and using the right techniques, because there are many life or stress management hacks that you can actually use, but most people don't know them. They just push hard because, no, my body needs to listen. I need to achieve this, and it results in burnout and chronic stress.
Yeah, and also on the topic of a family member who's not well, when you're managing your emotions and yourself and you're getting better, you actually help to support them even more. I think that's another thing that we don't realize. Yeah, you are able to give them the support they need by supporting yourself. So one more question on burning out from Sylvia. She's asking, seeing as we live in quite a competitive and capitalistic world, there is constantly this pressure to achieve. How can one find a healthy balance between achieving and maintaining your mental health and avoiding burnout?
Once again, ask yourself the question, how do I want to feel? And know your limits. It's actually, the beauty of it being is that you carry all the answers you will ever need inside of you. You just have to listen. You have to listen to your body. You have to listen to your gut feeling. And if you ask for help, you basically ask for guidance and learning new techniques. But the knowledge, you already have that. And that's the beauty of it. You don't have to change. You just have to let go of what does not serve you. And the trick is to actually find out what are the things that don't serve you. And there are several techniques and hacks that you can use. And that's where a coach is coming in to help you to get a different viewpoint, to see it from a different perspective and angle, and to use the tools.
Okay. And Njeri, Elizabeth John says, I would like to ask Njeri to share some of her key challenges in assessing AML compliance, especially working for a bank. Generally.
She's muted.
Yeah, she's muted. You're muted, yes.
Yeah. Hi, Elizabeth. Thanks for that question. I think, first of all, just to explain that AML within a bank is a support function primarily, and I think in order for you to be able to do well in that role, you really need to keep abreast of the many changes that are taking place. It's a dynamic environment. There's constantly changes and need for engagement with regulators, as well as getting buy-in from stakeholders. And because of that, you need to be able to influence change, tackle difficult changes within business. Sometimes you are the mediator between a new regulation and again the objectives of other stakeholders, and sometimes they can clash. It also requires you having a holistic set of skills. So I think especially when you're in a support function, you do experience the challenges that other support functions have, but you can be able to marry that with the skills that I just mentioned. So being able to influence discussions, being able to deal with conflict is equally important, because sometimes the way the legislation is interpreted can differ between different persons. So I think it's a conversation that I'm willing to have as well offline, Obviously, not everything can be discussed now, but it's actually a passion of mine. So I'm willing to take you through the day-to-days and how to handle the ropes. Yeah.
You're muted.
Christine?
Sorry. Sorry, okay. Fafa says, I didn't get to ask Njeri before she got cut off. Is a finance background necessary to carve out a career in AML?
I would say it's beneficial. I wouldn't say it's necessary. AML, we have different skills from legal, compliance, auditing, but I wouldn't say that it's necessary. I would say it's definitely beneficial. But there are different roles that we have within the AML field, so it would depend on exactly what you want to pursue.
Mm-hmm. The two last questions. Claire, how do you ensure that the culture of the organization is in line with your identity?
Okay, so I think this question is really, it's an interesting question, because often we hear that people leave bosses, they don't leave organizations. So when you're asking about the culture, the culture of the organization, my first question would be how do you relate to your immediate supervisor? Because often that is the benchmark in your view of the organization. I think it's important for you to be able to marry a value that you have with the organization, but at the same time be cognizant of those who are working around you, because that informs your view of the organization. So a practical example would be integrity, right? Integrity is a value that you, for example, carry. The organization could have it in their value statement, but how is your relationship with those of your peers and those around you? And I think that informs your view of the organization more than the statement. So I think it's that's my take on it. Is really a lot of times you could find people working in a toxic environment, but within their team they're very happy, and that's their view of the organization. So I think the first point of call is look at those that you see on a day-to-day basis, very close to you, yeah, and to interrogate whether their values are aligned to yours, and take it from there.
And then Shira wants to know, how do you make yourself more visible in whichever space you wish to be heard?
Okay, so I would tell Shiro to also consider those insights from the slide on demonstrating your value. Definitely study your environment. I think, if I haven't said it enough, it's very important. If you want to make yourself visible, you need to know what is the thinking of the leaders in the space that you're in, what triggers and informs discussions of progression, or and exactly what is viewed as high performance in that environment. So once you've established what that is in that environment, then you're able to align yourself to it. If you are not able to pick up on your environment, if you're not able to establish rapport with the decision makers and identify what are the indicators of success for them, then you will struggle to make yourself visible.
The last two questions are for each one of you, and they are both on negotiation. So Njeri, before you got cut off, we were talking about how to negotiate pay generally. Very quickly, could you give us some tips on how to go about this conversation of negotiating a higher salary? And Tabea, how do you negotiate boundaries, even with the people in your life? You mentioned black tax and the expectations that our families have of us. and you find yourself juggling a million things and burning out. So how do you negotiate for yourself better terms so that you don't burn out? So very quickly, ladies, could you please address those two? And Njeri, you can start.
Should I go first? I think what I should say, and probably I didn't mention in my slide, is that salary nowadays is not only looked at from a monetary perspective, right? So like I mentioned, you have to really, really consider the context in which you're working, and the environment that you're in, the persons that you're engaging with, the culture thereof. But it really comes down to having informed decisions based on fact and authentic conversations. So you would have to first determine what it is you want for yourself and what is important for yourself. For some people, they want more flexible hours. They'd be able to compromise on salary for more flexible hours, or they want to see that they can be able to progress through education. So they want to see those benefits. Depending on your age group, also pension could be important for you. So I think first is interrogating what are your desires when it comes to compensation, recognizing that compensation is not only monetary and exploring all of those facets, and then having an informed discussion based on facts within the context that you're in. I think that's very important.
Thank you, Njeri. Tabea.
Okay, no matter what you do in life, success basically requires 3 ingredients, and that's clarity, commitment, and consistency. And success doesn't care how you feel, how your hair looks, whether you're tired or if your house is clean. It doesn't matter. And it's the same with boundaries. Yeah, I mentioned the black tax. And very often my friends tell me whenever they go to the village to family functions, it's like a very toxic experience. It's almost traumatizing. They refuse to go. Traditions are good and well. But if they affect your well-being, then it's time for them to change, because the only constant is change. And these traditions haven't been in place for the longest time. And especially when black tax becomes a burden, because it can also be abused. And how do you stop that? By setting up boundaries. But first and foremost, you need clarity. You need to be really clear what you want, and then you need to be committed and consistent. So in essence, you are verbal about what you want to stop. And don't address that while you are in a heated argument. Cool down, give it some time, and then just convey the message from an I perspective and say, when you do X, Y, Z, I feel, and I don't like it, please stop. But be prepared that people test your boundaries. I mean, not only children, people in general test boundaries, because they also need to know how far can they go. So the second time around that they cross that line, the invisible line that you have painted now, you need to attach a consequence. Once again, don't get into an argument. Wait until the situation has cooled down. Then say the same sentence. We've talked about this. You did X, Y, Z again. Please stop that. Or otherwise, I will have to cut contact, or whatever the consequence might be. But the trick is, when it happens the third time, you need to be willing to follow through with the consequence. Otherwise, you will be a walkover. So that's why it's so important to be clear, committed, and consistent. It takes strength, but I did the trick with my 2 kids, and it works like a bomb. In the beginning, it's very strenuous, but eventually they understand that a no is a no. And if you say what you mean, and you mean what you say, people will take you seriously.
Thank you so much, ladies. Wow, what a powerful session it has been. I really appreciate this. I think the feedback in the chat section is also very encouraging. Mofo King says this was so invaluable, and he's going back to, or she's going back to the drawing board. Thank you so much for joining us, everybody. This was our very first session. On Sunday, we will be discussing mental health and personal transformation. If you'd like to sign up, I'll send you an email. Njeri and Tabea, you are amazing. People want to know how to get hold of you. We will see how to work around that. In future, we will be offering coaching programs so you can interact with all our speakers. Other than that, have a very nice evening. I know I could keep you here until 9, right?
Quite comfy in here.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for joining, everybody, and have a wonderful Friday evening, Workers' Day, Workers' Night.
Thank you, Kristen. And thank you to
Thanks so
everyone
much.
who
Who joined.
Thanks for having us,
Cheers.
and thank you for listening and joining. We do this for you, and to build a better future for all of us.
All of us. Thanks so much, everybody, and have a good night.